The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening around the world, and welcome to our webinar. I'm Guy Finley, the president of Mesa. Today, we're going to learn how these wonderful companies are using this fabulous tool, Sony C. So we've got some great attendees, some interesting dialogue and discussion, even some live demos. So we're very excited that you've tuned in today, and we look forward to a great hour presentation. A couple of housekeeping things in the background. You all have a go to webinar dialog box over on the side of your screen if you've downloaded the client. There's a couple of important pieces in there. One, first and foremost, is questions. The idea is if we're involved in a conversation and you want to engage with the panelists or the speaker at the time, feel free to put your question into the questions dialog box. Also, if you're having any issues, technical issues, you can also use the chat dialog to be able to communicate with the producers behind the scenes. We've got a tremendous panel discussion going on today. Great group of participants. And ultimately, this is about an hour of insightful, informative information to help you all do your job. So I'd love to introduce the panelists and let's get started. First of all, we've got Adam Goldfried, who's the post-production manager at CBS News. We've got, hey Adam, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Guy?
Excellent. Tim Mangini, who's the Senior Director of Production Technology of the production group at WGBH in Boston. Hey, Tim, how are you?
Hey, everybody.
Excellent. We got Glenn Marzan, who's the VP of Digital Content Technologies at Sony Pictures Entertainment. Hey, Glenn.
Hey everyone.
Awesome. And then, of course, we've got David Rosen, who is the Vice President of Cloud Applications and Services at Sony Imaging Products and Solutions. And David's going to actually kick it off and start the dialogue and conversation. David, you want to take it away?
Yeah, thanks, Guy. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get going here.
Absolutely.
Okay. Guy, can you give me the nod? Are we looking okay?
We're looking good.
All right, here we go. Guys, thanks so much for, well, jump the gun. Thanks so much for taking time today to walk through what we think is going to be a really lively and interesting discussion. We've got some really great panelists, as Guy mentioned, all experts in their field. And their specific roles may differ a little bit, but the important thing that kind of brings them together on this panel is they're all responsible for making technology decisions that are ultimately going to help either production or post-production work as efficiently as possible. So really happy to have them. I'm excited to listen and to learn from them, and hopefully you're going to get a lot out of it. There's been a lot of challenges with regards to how content moves around and gets created in the last couple of months, for sure. Everybody's aware of that. But what's interesting about all of the folks on this panel in particular is they had made decisions before 2 months ago to start moving parts of their workflows into the cloud, and as a result, they were very well positioned to react quickly to the changes that have recently happened. So again, we're lucky to have them. We're excited to get going. Before we do, we want to talk through two quick things. One, I'm going to give you a quick overview of Sony C, just to give you some context of the tool set that we're talking about. But then we're also going to do a very quick and brief live demonstration of a feature that's been in C for a long time, but has kind of exploded in usage in the last 2 months, and that's our live session feature within C, which lets people collaborate in real time and have a shared viewing experience. So we thought we've got people who are responsible for making that technology available to their own groups on the line. Why not do one here for everybody else really quickly? So once we do that, we'll get straight into the panel discussion and get to where I think it hopefully will become even more interesting. Okay, so what is C and why did we build it? Really because of what we see here. On the left, you've got your expectations, and the right, reality. And the expectations are, when organizations are buying these individual point solutions, they're buying them because they do things really, really well, whether it's for file transfer, transcoding, storage, whatever the case may be. And so in their minds, they've got this expectation that all of these disparate applications are going to work together in a unified workflow, and they do for the most part. But it takes a lot of work, and over time, what they end up with is a collection of very different applications that have a lot of functional overlap, meaning they're being used for a lot of the same things, But the worst part of it is that content is getting moved from location to location, so these applications and these people can take advantage of it. And so every time you're moving that content, obviously there's time involved, there's costs involved, you're storing that content in multiple places, and there's security ramifications of doing that, right? Every place you put that content is one more place that you have to secure. So there's certainly some challenges, and that's really why we created CMedia Cloud in the first place. You know, our intention is to provide a central location where various groups, regardless of what part of the organization or the content lifecycle they're in, can come to the content, and the processing can come to the content as well. So rather than moving the content around from person to person, group to group, or application to application, you bring the people and the processing to that content. That's the intention. So really, C is built for end-to-end workflows. We're used, you know, all the way in production through post-production, and then out through distribution and marketing as well. You know, our intention is not to focus on one particular part of the life cycle, but make sure that we're providing tools, which they're not going to meet everybody's 100% needs for every aspect of the workflow, but it will provide a really important component to those workflows, and that is a centralized location that's secure and has the right amount of processing that can be applied to that content. Okay. And by the way, being a cloud-native application, it really lends itself to that, because now people from anywhere can access that. Okay. So today, our focus is mainly going to be around the areas of remote collaboration, and you know, to us, that means a few things. Ultimately, it means how can we get content into a location where lots of different people, wherever they are, can have access to it. So multi-site contribution. And so on the right, we highlighted some of the items in blue that are particularly important to these collaborative workflows. In addition, you want to be able to find that content, so search is obviously important. Accelerated transfers, people have really come to appreciate the availability of file transfer acceleration, I think more so than ever. You know, when we're sitting in our corporate offices, oftentimes we've got really excellent bandwidth. When we're sitting at our home, not so much. I'm embarrassed to admit that even though I've been in this industry for an incredibly long time and work in video workflows quite a bit, I get a paltry 15 megabits per second to share with my Netflix streaming son and, you know, wife who is doing all kinds of things on the internet as well. So not always the same experience from a bandwidth perspective. So having that file transfer acceleration built in is a huge benefit for sure, because I can at least get the most out of my bandwidth. And then the live collaboration is really key, especially now. The feature that we're going to demo here in a second with LiveSession, we've seen a spike in usage. I haven't checked it this week, but as of last week, it was up over 650% just over 2 weeks ago, or 2 months ago rather. So people are really finding the benefit of being able to see the same thing at the same time, to comment and annotate in real time, to be really valuable. And then additionally, for these remote-based workflows, oftentimes you're having all of the source material uploaded, you know, into a central location. So your editors can get access to it, so your folks in marketing can get access to it eventually. But maybe they don't always need the whole content. They just need to clip out certain portions that they can use. This has become hugely beneficial, mainly because of the bandwidth limitations, right? You can't download hundreds of terabytes of content to have local, so you can maybe peruse through it. Having a place where you can see what you want to see, pick the pieces that you need, and extract only what you need really makes it a lot better from the perspective of only pulling down the content that you absolutely need. Okay, so with that, real quick, we'll just highlight a couple of the features that we may touch on in the conversation today, but so you're aware of. One is, how do you get content in from remote locations? So C has a concept called file request. It's a request for files. You send it out, you can have metadata pre-tagged to it, you can have people automatically notified whenever it's utilized or new content comes in, and the content is routed specifically to the right workspace or folder where it should go. So this is really important when you've got people that aren't used to necessarily uploading content and working with the system to make it drop dead simple for them. So you literally send them a link, they upload their files, and they walk away. Secondly, we're seeing a lot of this, and we actually did a webinar, you should check it out at Silicon Mesa last month, where we highlighted how certain customers, in this case an NHRA, is editing it entirely in the cloud. So we've got a Premiere panel integration where you can be working directly within Premiere, and you have access to all the content that is in C. And you can, again, just pull in the pieces that you need to pull in. But again, having that content in a central cloud-based location means you can start bringing a lot of those processes to the content, and editing is definitely one of them. And then what we'll talk about here next is the live session capability within our video review application, which is all about bringing people together, letting them comment, see each other's feedback, and then taking that feedback into the next step, whether that's sending the legal for compliance in a nice PDF, or whether it's taking the time-based markers and annotation into information that can be directly imported into an NLE. Okay. With that, it's as much kind of high-level overview as I think we should go through today, because we really want to get to the conversation. But what I'd like to do now is hand it over to Tim. I'll still show my screen so that you guys can see what I'm seeing. But what we're going to show you is a true live session. And Tim Mangini will mention how they're using it and kind of walk us through the protocol of how he likes to set these up for his teams. And you guys will see what we see. Now, one thing that I do want to point out, all of us that are going to be participating in this live session, we're going to be seeing it through our web browser. And one of the major benefits of doing that is the viewing experience is seamless. It's true adaptive bitrate streaming, it's frame accurate, and people are seeing the same thing at the same time. You all, unfortunately, will be seeing the video through GoToWebinar, which is not a video sharing application, right? Just like Zoom is not, Teams is not. These things are great at showing video where, I don't know, what is it, 10 frames per second or something like that, and that's okay. It's not ideal for sharing video, and that's really why we built this capability directly within C, is people can use the video conferencing tool of their choice, Zoom, WebEx, Teams, doesn't matter, GoToWebinar, but they can have a true viewing experience that mimics what they would be seeing if they were in the same room with somebody. So you all may not see the same seamless playback that we do. I hope you do, but if you don't, please accept my apologies. It's a result of it going through the GoToWebinar. All right, with that, Tim, I'm going to go ahead and go on mute for a moment. And if you can unmute yourself and take over, I'll go ahead and show my web browser.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, David. Yeah, Frontline recently had to put a number of programs on the air quickly. None of them were coronavirus related, but we had gone to a work from home model. The week before, we had 3 consecutive weekly screenings for Frontline, which is a weekly series that's dealing with current events. So we knew, and our typical Frontline screening model has 15 to 20 people in a screening room here at WGBH with high-end monitors and good speakers and all that kind of thing. We go through a screening on Wednesday, we all give notes. We go through a screening on Thursday, we all give notes. We're all together in the same room, and there's a rhythm to it. Well, in order to mimic that, we decided to use the Sony C Live feature. In fact, just before I came on, I got a note from American Experience. Their post super sent me a note saying it is their favorite virtual tool because it allows them to kind of work using this tool quite easily. And so what we do before we start a session is we send out an email to everybody who's going to be in the screening, lay down a little bit of the ground rules, and we usually actually do a test session with people ahead of time. But just prior to the screening, we open up a conference call, and that conference call, usually our production director, Megan McGuff from Frontline, goes through all of the different aspects that people need to understand. So when you're going to do a screening on Sony C, there's a few key things that people need to know. So number one, there is a time code window. So if you look at it, it's kind of hard to see here, but on the lower left, there's a button in the lower left called time code. And the person running the session clicks that, and it adds a time code window to the top of the frame. And there, David's just done that. And you can use TS, timestamp, time code. We use time code because that's kind of our in-house method. There's different reasons for different aspects of it. Another thing that we ask them to do is, of course, ahead of time, we've told them, click the button in the lower right that says live session. Because if they don't click that, they don't actually see the session live. It ends up being a working session. So yeah, David's highlighting that down there now. And then we ask them to go to full screen mode. There's a button in the lower right near the timeline. You click that, and you can either see full screen or less full screen, right? And there are reasons why you may want to work in different modes. When we're doing a screening for a number of people and we're running through the show beginning to end and we're not taking notes during that screening, we just use full screen mode. If we're doing an actual kind of interactive process, we use the smaller screen mode because you have access to kind of a chat window and a way of adding notes. And then during the conference call, we tell them, everybody, please mute your microphones, mute your cell phones, whatever you're talking on, because otherwise the speakers from what you're watching go through the cell phone and cause interference, and it makes everybody mad. So then we hit play, we watch through the program. When the program is done, we have a regimented process of going through the notes. So executive producer goes first, director goes second, producer goes third, editor goes fourth. So we go through this process of going through their specific notes. At that time, the person running the session, which is usually our colorist, there's a window down in the lower right, kind of hard to see here, that shows the time code that you can type in the time code you want to go to. So somebody says, go to 1522, and you type that in, and then the session pops there. Obviously, you go a little bit earlier, and then there's a very handy go back 3 seconds feature, which is near the play button. And so that way they can hit play, and then the people who are watching the screening say, oh yeah, you see that cut? That didn't work for me because of XYZ. So, and then whoever the editor or the mixer or whoever is responsible for that particular item takes those notes moving forward. And so that's kind of the rhythm that we go through to run a session until everybody's gone through their notes. Then we go back, we work on the program, and then we have another session the next day or however often we need to do it. So that's a rough talk through of how we use the tool for a live session. Is that what you wanted me to talk about, David?
Yeah, that's excellent. And I learned a lot too. I didn't realize that you guys structured it in that particular way where you had your executive producer first and then kind of go on down the line. That makes a lot of sense and is really useful. So, hey, why don't we quickly just point out a couple of things here. So, if I look here and I click on this little view live session members here, it's going to show who's currently in it. So we can see that, David's in it, Glenn's in it, Tim's in it, Yoshi's in it.
And David, that's really handy because when you are running the session, you need to know the key people have joined, right? We need to know that the 5 people who got to be there are there and that they've clicked live session. And if they're not in the session, we know that somebody has to reach out to them by text or phone and say, hey, is everything okay?
A quick question from the audience, right in the middle of this. Who controls the playback?
Great question. And Tim's going to have some feedback on this because he was one of the first customers to use this when we rolled it out. In fact, it was his team's guidance that led into some of this. And we had thought, being the software-focused people that we are, well, we must have order. There must be one and only one person controlling the playback. And Tim kind of shut that down really quickly and said, no, that's not going to work. So in this situation, any participant can control the playback and move frames around. And Tim, I don't know if things have changed or if you've kind of made that a rule where only one person will control it or not, but be interested to hear your feedback.
Well, it really depends on the team that's using it. So it depends on the application. So there are applications where you want multiple people to be able to control it so they can go to a spot and control it. That is one of the things I forgot to mention. Prior to a screening, we say, please don't touch your keyboard because you will stop the playback for everybody. And so that is both a great benefit in some circumstances and a downside. What I think would be a great feature is a lockout mode. so that you could have one person driving the car, and that when and then when you want to be able to let somebody else control it, they do it.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that's we've heard that feedback from a couple of people now, and Glenn, I know Glenn has had that as well as some other feedback come from some of his customers. So that is something that we're going to look to add, which is the owner of the session, whoever created it, will be able to toggle on and off the ability for people to control. Okay, so you saw there, and Yoshi, I saw you dropped in and out. That's useful. Whenever anybody changes, everybody gets a little visual notification that they've come into the session. So it's not like you get any people, I don't know if your kids play around with house party, apparently you can just drop in and nobody knows you're there. We don't want that happening here. So you get visual cues that people are in. And so, by the way, you can also just click play. Now it's playing for everybody. Now, guys and gals, if you don't mind, maybe you can show how we can annotate at the real time. So as we're talking, I could be saying, Tim could be saying, hey, right here, it's wait, we should have used a Steadicam. People can be drawing here. I could come over and actually add a note there that says, see if we can zoom in, whatever the case may be. And those notes are going to get tagged at the time code when I actually hit the return key. But anybody can play it. You can see here that I'm the one that played it last, but I don't know, Tim or Yoshia, if you want to stop the video. Yeah, Tim doesn't like that frame, understand. So now Tim paused it, and as you guys can see, it pauses for me. So that's the nuts and bolts of it. No need to go into too much more detail. Unless there's any specific questions on this, we're happy to answer them. But did want to give you guys kind of a sense of how this is used today for some of the people that are going to be talking today.
Well, we do have some questions actually out from the field, and they're pretty nuts and bolts. So maybe we can tick through these really quickly before we get into our conversation. Okay. Will this display closed captions?
It does not currently display closed captions, though as part of the ingest process, we will extract those closed captions so we can have that data. It's just a matter of now adding it as a visualization. So that is something that's on the roadmap.
Okay. Is there a limit to attendees of a live session?
There's not. And just before this call, we got and I say there's not, we tested up to about 100 people when we were originally building this, and our expectation was, well, no one will ever use 100 people. And just got off of a call right before this where people said, we want to have a shared viewing experience for our entire company, and there's 800 employees. Any problems with using a live session? Basically, they want to use Netflix, like a Netflix party, but with content that's in C. So I said, I'm not sure. Let me go back and find out. So our team is going to be doing some testing on this to see what happens at that level. The answer that I got back from our team is it really should not have any limit, because ultimately this isn't a situation where everybody is pulling this content and streaming it from a single file on a single server. This content is distributed across, AWS's CDN, and everybody's pulling that from wherever the edge is closest to them. So the only thing that is being synchronized are the commands going between the browser back to our system. So the number of people really shouldn't impact the streaming quality at all. The only thing that I wonder about is, what's the interactivity going to look like if you have 800 people and they're all trying to draw on the screen, which sure. led to another request in that same conversation, similar to what you just brought up, Tim, which is, hey, can we lock people out from drawing so that they can't draw on the screen at all? So we're going to consider that as well.
That's a great segue, actually, David, because I'll just give you the surprise right now. We're looking at doing one with 2,000 people.
Ooh, you just took the record.
Yeah. So obviously, we're looking at doing it from a possible employee screening standpoint or a screening standpoint, obviously, because people want to, sales and marketing want to show some of our content to people, but they want to make it an event. Instead of sending someone a link and just saying, hey, watch this and give us some feedback, they want to do it all at the same time. So now that if you can do 800, we're hoping you can do 2,000.
All right, well, good. I'll pass that along.
Yeah. Don't look too shocked.
Yeah. By the way, the questions are coming into the clip. There's probably about 25 in there, so I'll ask Yoshi if she can answer some of them privately. One thing is people are talking about notes. So is this like a call-in phoner and everybody's on the tool? Can you use like a video conferencing thing while you're on this, via a second screen? There's a lot of question marks around. There's a lot of questions around how do you actually engage and interact? What's the note process, note-taking process, and how do you facilitate that? I think it's a good sidebar for right now.
Okay, perfect. So yes, you use the video conferencing tool of your choice. So right now we happen to be using GoToWebinar, and the participants in this live session have the video review open in their own browser. So we're working in a kind of a two-screen setup. You can do it in the same screen, obviously. Like I could pull this over here, and you guys could see it, so that if I wanted to see everybody at the same time, I could. But all of the video review is happening in directly within C. Regarding note-taking, so all these comments that are getting added here, and they're threaded, so agreed, we should use this. All of that is captured. It's always going to be there. And the important thing is this is captured in this session. It's not captured against the asset. Other people may have access to this asset, and we don't want them to see all of these comments. This is private. It's still a small group of people. So the important thing to understand is these notes are private to only the people that are in this particular session right now. You can export this, all of it, into a PDF so that every frame is going to be visible with the annotation and the comments associated with it, or as markers, which you then can import directly into your NLE. So either way. And with that, Guy, would you recommend maybe we try to answer questions through chat and get the panel going? Because I really want to hear from these guys.
Absolutely, please. And ultimately, so we're done with the demo. We're done with the live session thing. Should we stop sharing screen? Do you think we'll stay in here for? Oh, perfect. Okay, excellent.
Let's stop. Let's stop.
All right. Well, fascinating. And what's really great here is this is a great group of early cloud adopters. Really, I mean, when you take the plunge on Sony C, you're committing yourself to an advanced, somewhat more frictionless workflow around it. So, congratulations to all you gentlemen who've adopted. Now, since you're all early adopters, and we all know what's been going on in our universe, particularly since March 15th, how is this tool and how has this cloud solution impacted that process? I'd love to hear from you all around, like the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we can get into individual cases. But I can start with Adam. If you don't mind. So a little window into what's been going on, especially over the last couple months.
I think for us, we've been pretty deeply integrated with Sony C for a couple of years now. So it made it really easy for us to transition. Prior to this, we would push pretty much everything. After ingest, we would push it through a Vantage workflow, just to shrink the files, and then deliver it directly to Sony C. So everybody would already be able to work from home, or they would use it at their desktop at work. And then when this happened, we kind of switched from that model of shrinking the files down, really just to make it faster and keep the cost down, to having to rescue everything on our shared storage at the CBS News magazine shows. So we just started bulk uploading. Once it started happening around March 15th, we just started bulk uploading everything from our various Nexuses and ISISes and pushing up all the MXF op-atom media. And that's what we use to deliver and distribute to editors working from home. And we would stream from it, and then they would download everything and put it on local drives in their editing laptops. So
Tim?
that's been really like the primary use for us, which has been, it's a pretty straightforward, simple way that we use it, but the volume is incredible. Everything that we do is on it at this point. Certainly with the magazine shows. So
Tim, similar? Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. The full duplex. So apologies for stepping on your toes. No worries at all. Tim, similar challenges on your side, Tim, as well?
Yeah. So my team, which is the production group, we oversee production and post for both local television, but also our national brands, Frontline, Nova, American Experience, Antique Roadshow, Masterpiece, and so on. And every one of those teams has been using Sony C for quite a long time. I mean, we were very early adopters, David will tell you, and found it very useful. So we have always used it at a number of places in our workflow. So we have teams that acquire in the field, they upload to C, and that way editors can get an early jump on things, or people who are doing promos can see the material. It's like in a shareable, secure space. So, you know, that's kind of the first use case. And then we have, it's great for editorial reviews. An editor in New York or London, you know, finishes a cut, they upload a cut for the executive producer to watch. They watch it, they send back notes. And then, of course, we use the live screening feature. We pass materials around to each other within the company that way, if it's more convenient to do that than inside our own infrastructure. When we moved to work from home, very rapid. So in about a week, we moved up to, I think, 40 editors in the first week to working VDI, so virtual desktop. And all of their media is here at WGBH, and they're working through a virtual desktop. But that means that when media needs to come into our system, it needs to get in here somehow. Sony C is one of the tools that we use to move material in and out. And then the third way, of course, is these live screenings. And that was a huge benefit that we could jump right on it. We were, again, early adopters to the Sony LiveSession, Sony C LiveSession. So we already kind of knew how to do that. Now, there are ways in which it is less optimal. So for example, 2 weeks ago, we did a program about coronavirus that was 5 weeks in gestation. A typical Frontline is 8 months to a year. So it was a fast turn. So then we were getting really close to air, you know, within a day of air, and we were having screenings. And you know, it takes us a certain amount of time to export the program and then upload it to Sony C. That we allow a 2-hour window because we want people to start a screening at a time certain. So because we would have to wait that long, instead we used our internal streaming service. So we just output from the Avid directly through a stream. Now that had its own technical problems, and people all said, why can't we use C? It's so much better quality. And true, Sony C is pretty flawless quality, but we would have lost 2 hours of making notes. Now, my understanding is Sony is coming out with a streaming version of LiveSession. That'll be pretty cool, right? Like, so if we could go straight out of our Avid to a live session like this, that would solve that particular problem. So that's one of the ways we've been, some of the ways we have historically used it, and we're still using it. I would say we're probably doubling to tripling the amount we're using it right now. Oh, Guy, can't hear you. You must be muted or something. Oh, still can't hear you.
Hang on, sorry. I was actually I was meeting Glenn as the plane flew over as well. You know, these are the challenges, right? In this distributed workflow, we're all in virtual studios. This is you know, my attic. So it's interesting also that you brought up workflow because I think that's also something. And Glenn, hopefully the plane has flown over, or the fire truck has. You're good to go. All right, okay. But you know, I mean, this also seems like you know, it helps aid these frictionless workflows. You know, there's an evolution around this. It's, you know, one thing around cloud and not having NAS or other, you know, on-prem storage or a drive plugged in that's air gap. But Glenn, maybe can you talk a little bit from the workflow perspective and some of the either the challenges or changes that you've overcome with this tool? Hang on. Now I got to unmute you. All right, you're live.
All right, there we go. Yeah, I was going to mention, obviously, being Sony Pictures, we were also early adopters of the C platform. For us, we've been using C since it started. So, and we use it a lot in the VFX world. So think about the videos that we're uploading are, you know, 5 seconds, 10 seconds long, right? But LiveSession works great for us because of how quickly we can put a team together to do a review. And you'll get people typically, you know, for example, some productions that we're doing now, you know, people are in London, people are in San Francisco, people are in LA, and you can just, you know, spin up a session very quickly and start talking about it. So that really helps. in the current scenarios that we have. Obviously, in recent, over the last few months, that has picked up. But for us, since we have been using it for quite some time, there was no difference for us. Whether the only difference, obviously, is people are working from home instead of working from an office, and so maybe they're a little more spread out than before. But the use of the tools hasn't changed because we've been using them for so long, right? So it was beneficial to be the early adopter of how the entire cloud thing works, because now that this unforeseen thing has happened, for us to switch wasn't that big of a deal. It was just, literally now you're at home instead of being in the office. And as Tim has said, the quality of video is so good. And the fact that on a live session, especially if you think about this for a video review session for VFX people, frame accuracy is huge, right? Because they're literally looking at it frame at a time and going, no, I want the lightning bolt to come from the left. And I need, and they can, with that frame accuracy, they can really review that shot pretty well. And then, yeah, they either use, Teams or Zoom or whatever to talk. I've actually sat in on a couple sessions because I wanted to get a feel for the workflow. And it's pretty amazing how you have, they will watch, I'm sorry, here comes another plane. They will watch the same shot 50 or 60 times, right? And they'll start from the beginning and they'll go to the end, and they'll start from the beginning and they'll go to the end. And every time they're looking at something different, and they're taking notes along the side. And it's a very collaborative environment, right? So you have the VFX soup, and you have, the editor and the director, and they're all kind of talking about the shot. And the fact that you can add shots that maybe you weren't thinking about having before, and not having to sync that stuff ahead of time, is huge for them. So if they go into a session and they have, let's say, 3 or 4 shots that they want to talk about, and they've allotted maybe an hour, and suddenly a half hour in, they've decided that they're done, they will then go, hey, now let's go talk about these shots. And those shots can just be added to the session in real time, and suddenly everyone has them. So that's a huge benefit for them, right? So they can continue to work. And in the new, work from home age, same thing. As long as you have access, as long as the content is already in C, it allows them to freely change. And in that environment, in a VFX workflow environment, it's a lot of ad hoc, because they're doing so many things at once, right? So yeah, sure. Do they plan? Yeah. Of course. But when they find themselves with 5 extra minutes, someone will always inadvertently say, hey, can we talk about shot 17? Works great.
Yep. Hey, David, quick question also from the crowd. Can you handle HDR? What's the sound quality like? Can you give a little bit of background in terms of that from the tools perspective?
Yeah, so these are, when you're doing a live session, you're actually watching proxies that we create upon ingest. And right now we're not applying, we're not handling HDR quite yet. We do handle multiple frame rates. The other question was about sound. So sound, it's limited right now to stereo or dual mono. That's the issue there. And actually, Tim, maybe you have some feedback there.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that one of the things we learned was that we were exporting a file and putting it up in C, but it was coming back down in mono. And it took our mixer to show us that when you export out of an Avid or many devices, that if you want certain types of devices, and Sony C is one of them, to recognize it as stereo, you need to click a little thing called interleaved. So you need your audio, when you export it, to know that it is a stereo pair that's interleaved, as opposed to 2 mono tracks, which it will make into mono.
Interesting. Also Adam and Tim, obviously Glenn talked about it kind of from a features perspective around workflows, but you're running and gunning, you got teams on the streets, you're producing these, weekly shows. What about workflow impacts and the ability for C to help you kind of produce with less friction and obviously at efficiencies?
Well, I think for us, one thing that's been huge that I should have mentioned before was the file acceleration using Aspera and using the multi-thread HTTP, because we've always used this for remote crews, but now that our crews really can't travel that well outside of New York, and almost everything that we're doing in 60 Minutes and 48 Hours and a couple of other shows is remote crews. So like we have a piece that we're doing in Utah, and I think we have another one that we're doing in Washington. So to get the files back, it's been invaluable. Just having the easy interface that there's almost no learning curve. I just onboard somebody and they can use it. That's been like so beneficial. But then the fact that it generates the proxies and it generates them quickly and it's such a high quality, you get the distribution. So it's like our FedEx for drives, but then you get the instant proxies that everybody on the team can screen. So I would say we would have a very hard time at this point dealing with the remote crews if we didn't have that.
Interesting. Tim, did you want to say something? Sorry, I thought you jumped in there.
Just on this coronavirus film we just did that Miles O'Brien Productions did for us, they had, because of the timeline, they had 3 separate editors, and then we had somebody ingesting material here at GBH at the same time for redundancy, and all that media was moved via Sony C. So you have 3 editors in 3 separate locations. It was easier for them to share, and they would upload and they would have a background download going on in the background and on their edit system while they edited, and when it was ready, ingest, and away you go. So it was, that was a fairly frictionless way to do it. We didn't have to ship drives around, which is an unsecure and challenging way to operate, right? We're trying to eliminate drives, and that's one way that you can do it. And I did want to add on to something that Glenn was talking about. He's talking about his VFX crews watching. Well, when we're doing these sessions and having people judge color grading, one thing that Megan's done over here is she's gotten monitors into the hands of the key people and had them tweaked by our technicians first. So those monitors, as close as possible, these are, generic off-the-shelf OLEDs, but we tweak them as close as we can to the Edit Suite monitor. They plug it into the HDMI out of their laptop, and they're seeing something that approximates what they would see here. And the quality of C so far has meant that the luminance and chrominance values are relatively well reflected on those monitors, so that those people can make decent judgment calls.
Let's talk about drives for a second. So for us, art departments, VFX departments, in their normal workflows before cloud, everybody had a drive somewhere, right? And drives on desks, drives that they were sharing amongst themselves, obviously in a very insecure way. So about a year ago, we, the studio and my department in particular, decided that drives weren't going to be allowed anymore. So your typical art department now, we onboard them into C, and all of the content goes into C. VFX, same thing, right? So we've eliminated people just, and on a production, you guys have to understand that the guy with the most IT experience is the computer guy. And a lot of times, they're running out to Best Buy and buying a Lacy drive and doing things that would make an InfoSec person just not sleep at night. So with C, we've been able to eliminate all of that. The other thing that it gives us value is, obviously, as people are moving around, they're not moving around drives, they're not picking up drives, they're not shipping drives. So we've reduced the amount of drives that are going around dramatically. Now, in some cases, you can't, if you're shooting in the desert of Morocco, as we did for Jumanji, you don't have connectivity and you're going to have to put some stuff on drives. But for the most part, we've eliminated all those drives, which is great for when they shut down, because then that turns into an archive. So then when we do the next sequel, and people, the first thing that people do is, if I'm doing the next Spider-Man, I need a lot of content from the last Spider-Man. Well, we have all that online now. And so it's very easy for me to give the new art department access to the old art department's content. It's very easy to find. It's all thumbnailed, it's all searchable. So that has created a huge efficiency as the studios continue to make, you know, sequels of content. You know, so Venom 1, Venom 2, you know, Spider-Man 5, you know, as we continue to do that, that data that is generated is very useful for the next feature. And so we use C for that as well. So we've gotten rid of LTO, and we have an archive, not of the feature, but of all of these ancillary parts, costume department, storyboards, set deck, all of that stuff that is important. Because if you're going to build Auntie May's living room from the last feature, you need all that continuity stuff. You need those drawings. And it was a very manual process before. You know, we have an assets department that keeps all those drawings and files them. And so when you're looking for stuff, and you have to find the right guy, and he has to hope that it's in the slot in the warehouse where the system says it is. And so we've gone from weeks to trying to find something to hours. So it is proved, as Adam was saying, invaluable. It has proved invaluable for us.
I always imagine the Indiana Jones, you know, credit to Paramount, but you know, that the storage archive, you know, a warehouse of doom, and the poor person that has to
Perfect example.
You know, Adam, this was interesting also, because we're bringing up a little bit of archiving. So once you air, how are you archiving? You know, and from a source material and from a finished product perspective, this is a good segue into that. We'll talk a little bit about security as well.
Well, I mean, at CBS overall, we've had a MAM system integrated with our Avid PAM for a long time, for the daily shows, and then for shows like 60 Minutes, they've actually still been archiving to XDCam, which is incredible, and it's 50 gigs of the clip. But they archive to XDCam mostly just because the MAM is being upgraded right now at CBS. That's been going on for, I think, the past year or two. So once that's done, assuming people go back in the building, it can handle more than one work group. But the MAM that's currently, or that was currently there, the MAM that was there before, it could only take one work group at a time. So that's why 60 Minutes wasn't using it. So they went to XDCam just because you could basically you could batch capture a piece in, and it was quick and it was easy and it was 100% reliable. So since early March, when we were all evacuated from the building, Sony C basically instantly replaced XDCam, and now everything from the local drives that the editors work on with their laptops, it gets pushed back up to Sony C, moved into Glacier, put in a folder that's labeled, and that's it. We've got proxies, and that's our archive.
A lot simpler.
It is very simple, and it works.
But you did have to do a little bit of scramble, right? You know, I mean, obviously, also that was, you know, unprecedented circumstance, right? Or at least within the last 100 years. But
oh, sure. And I mean, that's not the first time that we did it. We've had some smaller specials where we've used that as archive. So it's not the first time we've had a production do it, but it's the first time that we've had a group as large as 60 Minutes start doing it.
Yep. Tim, from an archive and asset management perspective, is C doing things for you as well?
Yeah, it's not directly involved in our asset management or archiving workflow because we just manage it in a different way internally. We use it elsewhere. We use the C in other areas of our production environment.
Sure. You know, we were talking earlier also about live session and reviews, and maybe we can go back and talk about that. And also, Glenn brought up some important points around security and ultimately air gap, sneaker net, drives in FedEx or, being hand carried depending upon the asset. Is security a concern for GBH in terms of the content that you produce? And has this tool assisted in that side as well in terms of authenticating users and making sure the right people have the right eyeballs on the right product?
Yeah, I think that security has been a driving force for us, for quite a while. We have very forward-thinking technology team here, And so we actually were fairly well positioned, as well as anybody could be, when this thing came down, because our IT group had already set up a full VDI environment so that we were ready to move people to VDI. And that meant that our editors could move off site and the media stayed on site behind our secure firewalls, right? So as much as possible, we're trying to keep our media from being exposed to the ravages of the world. And so, we had, for example, one of our mixers had to stay home, like he couldn't come in. And we still want to use that guy. He's a terrific mixer. He's got a full mixing facility out in his garage, you know, fully mirrors what we have at work from when he does freelance projects. Well, you know, instead of sending a drive over there, the producer just Sony C'd him all the material. He's up and mixing within an hour, right? So we're using it in little places and big places. So the fact that it is in a single secure environment, a single secure cloud environment, is a real benefit for us.
Sure. Hey, look, I talk a lot on the security side. I call it Danny Elfman's living room, right? You know, and by the way, it's a mythical Danny Elfman's living room. I don't even know if he works in his living room, but you know, the challenge is also when from a security perspective, obviously working within a tool is great, but there's also a challenge from a bandwidth perspective, right? It is somebody's living room or somebody's garage. We've got a bunch of questions on the ask from the audience around some of that. You know, how do you account for limited upload speeds that are capped from internet providers and whatnot? You know, the impact of Aspera on the workflow, and is that a separate license or is it included with your C license? I'm sure there's tons that we'll answer offline, but David, I didn't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about some of those capabilities as well, and how the tool reacts in those types of environments.
Sure, I can take a quick stab, and if the panelists have any other input, that'd probably be, you know, helpful with some real life scenarios. But so Aspera is built into C, so for all upload and download, any user can take advantage of it. There's just a browser plugin that they need. It's freely downloadable. It works on our own Aspera infrastructure that we host and scale in the cloud, so you don't have to buy any of your own. You don't have to have any separate licenses. It's just included. And it is a big benefit in the sense of, again, it doesn't magically create bandwidth for you, but it'll maximize whatever bandwidth that you do have. So, you know, people have found that to be really helpful. One of the things that has come up recently from a number of customers are folks that might use other file transfer acceleration technologies, like maybe Signet. And what we are releasing middle of next week, is something that's going to really help people do that, move content around anywhere, even between multiple clouds, in the sense that you'll be able to take any content that is in C and say, I want to send it to this particular S3 location, so a predefined bucket. And then you can use whatever file transfer acceleration technology you have that can access that to move content wherever it needs to go. So we have had a lot of customers wanting to be able to move content with Signet. And we've had some great conversations with them, and they have a really fantastic way to enable that. And the content never has to leave C in order to be transferred somewhere else by Signet in this case. So all that to say, there's a lot of different capabilities with regards to being able to move content with acceleration, even if you're not doing that directly with inside Sony C.
So that's an interesting thing. So most people don't realize, or your average person, that when you have, you know, Spectrum cable or Time Warner or whatever, you might have 300 or 400 megabits down, but you have 5 to 10 megabits up, right? And obviously, if you're moving content, that becomes an issue in this work from home environment. So how we get around that is we'll have coordinators remote into our offices, right? Using different, you know, VDI, and use the corporate bandwidth to move stuff via Aspera, get it into C, and then it's available to everyone, right? So we go around our home bandwidth, jump onto our office, because, you know, that infrastructure is still powered on and running, and use office bandwidth to move the content around to get it into C, and then obviously once it's in C, you're good to go. right? So that's how we've been able to get around people's home bandwidth where they just don't have a lot going up.
Sure.
We had to do the same thing at CBS. As soon as we left, there was a huge push for there was so many new VPN tickets and a need for that. But yeah, we did the exact same thing where people were remoting in from home, getting onto the corporate LAN, and essentially using Sony C to rescue shows from servers that are air gapped, but they are attached to the corporate LAN. Yeah, that's how we got around it.
Interesting. Tim, similar issues, or were you already set?
Yeah, I mean, no, it's so individual and dependent. Our production companies are so different and unique and far flung. If somebody's going to be doing media management, they know they got to be in a place where they can get decent speeds up and down. When we moved out of our facility, our facilities guys gave us the worst case scenario that, if somebody is exposed and the whole facility's been exposed and we got to clean it, you guys might have to be out of here. Nobody touches anything for 2 weeks. What are you going to do? So we actually had converted a room in our basement garage that had a computer and a server that connects to our system so that somebody could go in there, plug in, upload to the cloud or to our in-house storage systems. That was just one of those things that we had to do so that we could access to the building if we had to. Never had to go there, but one of those options. A
new definition of a safe room, right? I mean,
exactly.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Something else I would mention quickly, just speaking of Aspera, it's a small, it's a small function, but it's been really helpful for us. The file request. And I think a couple of years ago, it didn't have Aspera. And at some point, I don't remember when, but at some point you added the Aspera functionality to file request. It's amazing for us because anybody that shoots anything anywhere in the world or does a graphic for us or a mix or any type of media, whether they're a CBS employee or just a friend of somebody that has something of value for us, I can send them this link and basically, they get the link, they open it up. It's a very easy, simple dialog box. They put in their email address, they click a button, and they're prompted to download Aspera Connect. And once they do that, they can upload any media, any amount of media to any workspace that I choose. And it's completely secure, and they don't see anything on our side. It's just become the simplest way for me to get large files from anybody anywhere in the world. Awesome. I love that.
We use it all the time. We use it all.
Great, isn't it? It's the best.
Yeah, we use it. We'll create a link for a production and say, you can send this link to anyone you want. It's gonna, it's gonna land wherever we decide. They don't have access. They can't even see prior stuff that they've uploaded, right? They just get that dialogue. Everyone knows how to drag and drop.
And the best is you can actually reuse the link for different people.
Yep.
Different locations. You can just keep sending out the same link.
It's part of our onboarding process. We normally create an inbox part of the workspace, create a file request for them, and say, look, this is what you give to your vendors to send you content. Our producers love it.
Yeah, that thing is invaluable with Aspera. Now that it has Aspera, it's incredible.
Yeah, that ease of use is also so critical, right? When you talk about frictionless workflows, it's easy to use.
So it's everything. It's everything.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because before, even with Aspera, or going back to FTP, if you sent people credentials, they inadvertently always put the content in the wrong place, and then you had to go searching for it, and it added time, right? Now with a file request, where it's going to land. It can't land anywhere else. So and then it notifies you that things have been uploaded. So it's the best of all worlds. It's the best of all worlds.
I love that thing, and you should make it a bigger button. It's fantastic.
Well, gentlemen,
noted.
We've actually come to to our appointed time in terms of our Q&A portion. This has been a great dialogue. Thank you, by the way, everybody, for joining. And David, as I understand it, we're going to stay in the live session and keep going with a little more live session demo, or are we stopping now?
No, I think we, Tim did such a great job of walking us through. I think we covered that pretty well. Yeah, I think we're all done.
All right. Any other closing thoughts? Any other nuggets or crystal ball that anybody would like to offer before we say goodbye to our esteemed guest and audience? Look at that. Hey, look, I'm basically, I look at it like we're almost to the point where we're going to see, all right, what's our path out and how long it's going to take us. But ultimately, it's through this cloud adoption. These things tend to happen and accelerate certain things, right? The LTO, with the tsunami, this is also kind of a calling card to our industry around cloud adoption, ease of workflows, SaaS, other tools that should be utilized. But you all are ahead of the curve and we're early adopters. So on behalf of Sony C, and obviously, David, please come in and chime your final remarks. But on behalf of Mesa, thank you all for taking the time and sharing this journey with all of us. Excellent.
Thanks, Guy. And thanks, guys. Thank you all so much for taking time. I know how incredibly busy you all are right now, but to take this time and help educate the industry and our colleagues, I think is, I'm certainly appreciative, and I know everybody else is as well. So thank you guys very much. Anybody listening, if you want to learn more, please reach out. I think I had a slide here, but we'll make sure that you get it. But you can just reach out to us, sonymcs.com contact. And if you mention Mesa, I believe that we're giving a free trial to your organization. So, but you got to mention Mesa in the notes. But anyway,
2020.
Yeah.
No, that's funny. Thank you so much, David. Thank you also to our audience out there. We had hundreds of people on this. It's wonderful, and appreciate everybody's time today. And we'll say goodbye from the various parts of the world, East Coast, West Coast, and beyond. Thank you so much, gentlemen. You were great. And we'll see you on the next Mesa webinar. Excellent. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.